on the phone. Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone magazine. Welcome back to the Majority Report, Matt.
What's going on, Sam?
Not much. We should have taken that. We should have played we have a clip of your Meghan McArdle thing. We'll play it after you go. You were already there. You already remember what it was.
Yeah, I remember it.
So wonderful. So let's talk about this piece. I think you and hopefully our Attorney General in New York State were the only two people in the country, as far as I can tell, who are paying attention to what the Senate was doing. First, tell us about this investigation. Who is investigating Goldman Sachs and a couple of these banks, and why?
The Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, which is headed by Senator Carl Levin of Michigan and Republican Senator Tom Coburn from Oklahoma, they did this huge 2-year investigation of the mortgage bubble, and they focused on 3 companies, Washington Mutual, Goldman Sachs, and Deutsche Bank. And their results of the report just came out about a month ago. And what they really did is they kind of drew this huge panoramic portrait of the fraud that went on in the years leading up to the crash in 2008. And they just looked specifically at those 3 case studies.
And you outlined the findings, and we're going to talk about that. But how did Chuck Schumer allow this to happen? I mean, honestly, this investigative committee seems to have gone completely under the radar. I haven't heard anybody talk about its existence, at least in recent times. From a political standpoint, am I so jaded that I find it hard to believe that anybody was working on this?
It is a little bit surprising, and I think some of the people that I talked to in the Hill were a little surprised at the aggressiveness of this report, especially considering that it was somewhat genuinely bipartisan. I think Coburn's office definitely had some input into this report, and normally what you'd expect from a bipartisan committee is a kind of agnostic historical review of a problem that kind of identifies issues but doesn't sort of point the finger at individuals. That's exactly the opposite of what went on in this report. This report is a full-blown balls-out j'accuse type of thing, where they're really, kind of throwing the book at 3 companies, and in particular, one still thriving company in Goldman Sachs.
And I want to just give you kudos for the French dropping on the show. You get extra bonus points for that.
Finally got some use out of that high school education.
So, all right. So we have this report. It's come out. It's a 650-page report.
Right.
It is interesting in that it's bipartisan. It's interesting that relative to the fiscal emergency report that came out, that Blue Ribbon Commission, the Republicans didn't issue their own competing reports because of the use of words like fraud or Wall Street or something like that. And so we have this report. What? Tell me about the sort of the general surrounding. One of the things that came out of this was that there has been an incredible decrease in the oversight of this sector.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the report talks about is and you have to kind of go back in time here. If you go back to the late 80s and the early 90s, regulation was done in a completely different way. Your typical bank had a regulator from, it might have been the OCC, the Office of Controller of Currency, or the OTS, the Office of Thrift Supervision, or the FDIC. He would have somebody practically living on site at the banks, going through your books, going through your loans, because after all, banks, particularly commercial banks, obviously are federally insured, and so the state has an interest in making sure that everybody's safe, that there isn't a whole lot of deadly leverage on everybody's books, and that depositors are going to get paid.
And they're federally insured because we saw during the the Great Depression, we saw what happened when you have banks making crappy loans and they go under. It wreaks havoc on the entire financial system.
Absolutely, absolutely. It creates a kind of a third world situation where nobody's everybody's afraid to do business with everybody else because you always have to be weighing the solvency of all your business partners. Nobody wants to be in that situation, and that's why we put in these controls. But in the last 20 years or so, they've kind of eroded that whole process through a series of regulatory changes. And by the time we got to the mortgage bubble, the years we're talking about here, this process was almost completely voluntary. There were no longer people from the OTS or the OCC or the FDIC or the Fed, sniffing around everybody's books. They relied upon the banks themselves to essentially send voluntary disclosures to the regulators, telling them, about bad loans and other trends on the books. And Goldman was one of the banks that kind of pushed for those changes.
And you quote in your piece, quoting from your piece, in 1995, according to an independent study, banking regulators filed 1,837 referrals during the height of the financial crisis between 2007 and 2010, just 72.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Again, these banking regulators, they don't have their own prosecutorial power. So the way they would build a case is the investigators would go through, they'd gather all the evidence, and then they'd kind of hand it to the Justice Department and say, here, run with this. There was a criminal case, and that's how you got, for instance, during the S&L crisis. They actually put 1,700 or 1,800 people in jail during that time period through this process. But as the stats you just cited show, they essentially stopped doing that this decade. They really, as a matter of course, do not make referrals anymore. And in fact, when I called the OTS to ask about this, they very humorously were offended and said, "Well, what your statistics leave out is that we do a lot of verbal referrals." In other words, like we get on the phone and we tell somebody at the Justice Department, "Hey, you should check this out." I mean, it's just not serious. It's no longer a serious process.
Or to give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe the bankers really, really, really complied.
Right, right. Well, I mean, that was we're laughing about it, but that's kind of what everybody was depending on.
They were claiming, right? I just wanted you guys to know we're complying. Everything's fine. No problems here. So
nothing to see here.
So you have. So let's go now and focus on Goldman. These guys were able to essentially leverage extraordinary amounts of money, lend as much as they want, where they want, whatever. But now you have Goldman. What are the things that Goldman Sachs did that are now clearly illicit?
Yeah, I'm going to back up just a little tiny bit here and talk about the bigger picture, just because it kind of plays into what Goldman did. The chain of fraud here usually started with a company like Countrywide or New Century, right? So you had these kind of gigantic warehouse lenders that were using every trick in the book to create as many loans as they could. They were doctoring applications. They were using whiteout to substitute a good borrower's information in place of a bad borrower's, or they were pushing people who could have gotten fixed rate loans into more risky option ARM loans. They were taking people who weren't citizens. They were doing all kinds of faking credit scores, doing all this stuff just to create loans, right? Because the banks had created this method of converting crappy loans, like these subprime loans, into AAA rated securities. They use these derivative structures called CDOs, and it's just a whole bunch of hocus pocus math that allowed them to take all that crap and turn it into AAA rated investments, which are worth as much as like treasury bills. All right.
And we should also say that at this point too, that when Countrywide has no stakes in the loan being paid back, because all they're doing is basically servicing the loan in that moment and then selling the value of the note to somebody else. They have no skin in the game.
No, of course not. These guys were making these loans, and they were getting rid of them 10 minutes later. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating.
Right.
They weren't holding on to this stuff for any length of time. As soon as they were securitized, in other words, chopped up into little bits for sale into securities, they were off the lender's books, and then they were on the books of a company like Goldman Sachs, which then basically repeated exactly the same process. They got these loans, and they were trying to move them as quickly as possible to the next sucker down the line, who was typically like either a pension fund or a foreign bank or maybe another bank or a hedge fund, and that was the scam. You took a whole bunch of really, really risky, not very worthy subprime loans, you converted them magically into AAA rated securities, and then you sold them to people all around the world as solid gold, when of course they really were not. So that's the backdrop.
Now we should say, I just want to point out one thing too in this dynamic, because this is really important as we go into talk about Goldman, is that there was a lot of people out there who wanted to buy these things at that time, and they were looking for some investment that was going to give them a higher return, because we knew that Treasury bonds at that point were and still are kicking off very little interest, and so there was a real market there that was sort of pre-existing in a way, and in this function, Goldman is acting as a sort of a broker. Is just sort of like, you want to buy this stuff, we'll go find it for you.
It actually goes even farther than that. A lot of these companies were required to have a certain amount of AAA rated assets on their books to meet reserve requirements, whether it's insurance companies or other banks. I mean, you have to have liquid cash assets on your books to meet regulatory requirements. So a lot of these companies, these customers, like as you said, they wanted to have this stuff because it paid higher rates of return than Treasury bills or municipal bonds or whatever else. So there was this huge, vast market for this stuff that was actually, deadly and toxic and not really worthwhile. So anyway, so Goldman was sitting atop a whole bunch of these assets. They had accumulated a huge long position by the end of December of 2006. Partially by accident, because they had created this index to invest in mortgages, and they just had bought a whole bunch of stuff that they intended to resell later. But they were worried that they were going to get creamed on the mortgage market, so they kind of engaged in this conscious strategy to unload all their crap on their clients. And then they did that. Not only did they not tell their clients that they had this negative opinion of their inventory, but they didn't tell them that they were also betting against it at the same time, and that's kind of what Goldman did. They sold stuff that they knew was going to blow up, and then they bet against it at the same time. They didn't tell their clients about it, and then when they got called to Washington, they lied about it.
Okay, so now let's unpack this a little bit. At the end of 2006, Goldman has $6 billion worth of these assets. And they're sitting there. Now, a buddy of mine will say, well, look, it's their job to sell this. Everybody hedges against this stuff. So everything that Taibbi's talking about, that's called business. And so how is this different from the pristine confines of just business?
Okay, well, there's two things here. Number one, yes, absolutely, you do need to hedge, and if you have a $6 billion long position, it certainly would make sense to create a $6 billion short position to offset that, or a hedge of some kind, so that you don't take any losses. That's a broker dealer doesn't really want to be in the business of gambling. It really just wants to be making money on the commissions, the transactions. But Goldman went beyond that. They went beyond even. And they ended up with a $16 billion short position. So they were no longer just hedging. They were full-blown betting. They had come to the conclusion that this market was going to explode, and they went well beyond hedging into this world where they were actually creating this huge bet. And in fact, there's an email in one of these in the Levin Report documents where a very high-ranking official says very openly, "This is not a hedge. We're making a bet here." So there's that, and then there's also the fact that, yes, companies should be allowed to get rid of their bad inventory, but you have to tell your clients that you have, if you're betting against them, you can't, that's what we have securities laws for. You're not allowed to lie to people and say that you don't have an interest in this. You have to disclose that.
Yeah, and talk about some of the representations they made about these assets that they sold to their clients, because they told them that that this wasn't stuff that they were holding in reserve. These weren't bets that Goldman Sachs had made. This was stuff that they were actually actively going out and finding as of the request of their clients.
Right, yeah, and like in one deal, for instance, in the Hudson deal, they told their clients that the assets in the deal had quote unquote been sourced from the street. In other words, that they had gone out in the open market and bought this stuff. The reality was that this was all Goldman's own inventory, and that's a highly pertinent fact. If you're buying a bunch of securities from somebody, you definitely would want to know that if the company owned the stuff itself and was desperate to unload it, that's a fact you'd probably want to know, right? And that's what they call a material fact, and Goldman was definitely required to disclose that, and they didn't do it.
So in this instance, and just, I want to belabor this point because, for those of us like myself who don't really fully grasp this stuff, Goldman was presenting themselves as a broker. There are people
Right.
out there who have this stuff. We're going to broker the deal, as opposed to being an actual vendor. We have created these products. We have pooled these things. Could they get away with saying, well, when we said that we bought these in the open market, we did. We just had bought them in the open market a while back. What's the distinction there?
Yeah, they actually made an argument similar to that in response to some of the investigators. In fact, when one of the investigators asked one of the Goldman guys, like, yeah, how can you tell your clients that you bought this stuff off the street when in fact it came out of your own inventory? Well, the client's answer, I mean the Goldman's answer was, well, we are the street. If if we're buying it from ourselves, then that's no different from buying it from the street. But that's not really an answer. I mean, that's just parsing semantics and trying to worm your way out of the reality of the situation.
And so they also had an obligation, right, of to tell their clients that they were betting against it, and you can see that they sort of fudged that by telling their clients that they were that their interests were aligned with their clients because they had bought 6 million of the offering, without telling them that they had bet 16 billion against it.
It was 2 billion actually in that one. Yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, in one of the deals, they actually say affirmatively, our interests are aligned with yours because look, we own $6 million worth of this deal that we're selling to you. But they left out the part that they had done a $2 billion bet against it. And what's amazing in that deal is that when some of the clients, when it immediately started losing money. Again, this is like a car that doesn't even make it to the first stoplight. The engine's already exploding before it, as soon as it comes out of the lot, and the clients are instantly telling Goldman, hey, can you sell whatever's left, so we don't get completely creamed. Goldman stalled and refused to sell because the lower this stuff went in value, the more money they made because they had this gigantic short position on the other side of it. And I know all this stuff sounds complicated, and people are going to say, well, why should I care that one bank screwed another? But the problem is ultimately all of this fleecing ended up coming out of our pockets because of the bailouts, because of the bailout of AIG. This ultimately was really just theft from all of us.
And so, and who were these clients that were buying this stuff? I mean, was it just all hedge funds? Was it pension funds? Was it large institutions that said, like you say, we need to have a certain amount of AAA assets on our books, and this one's paying a much higher interest rate there, or theoretically will pay a higher interest rate than any other AAA product?
It was a whole range of clients. In one of the deals, the main client was Morgan Stanley, and they lost in the Hudson deal. They lost $960 million on that deal, which again, like who cares, right? It's Morgan Stanley. Like I'm not going to weep over them, except that within a year, the taxpayer was giving Morgan Stanley $10 billion to make up for its losses. So you could pretty directly say that Goldman ended up taking that money out of the taxpayer's pocket. In other cases, there was a Korean hedge fund that bought into the notorious Timberwolf deal, and then I know I talked to some guys at a now defunct Australian hedge fund that bought $100 million worth of this stuff at one point, and again, that was another car that exploded right out of the lot, and they were out of business within 2 months of doing that deal. So it was people all around the world, big companies and small, well, not small, but medium sized, and a variety.
And now, last year, the Goldman was sued by the SEC over something
Mhm.
called Abacus.
Right.
And so, how did they come out? I mean, tell me the details. How is that different from what was found here?
Well, Abacus is part of this report. They definitely there's a long section on Abacus in here, and yeah, what did they do in Abacus? There was a hedge fund guy named John Paulson, sort of a Viper short seller guy who realized the market was tanking, wanted to bet against it. So he goes to Goldman and he says, "I want you to help me put together a batch of the crappiest mortgages possible so that I can bet against them. But of course, in order to do that, you need to find somebody on the long side of the deal who will actually buy it, so that Paulson could short it." So Goldman and Paulson worked together to create this gigantic batch of really deadly mortgage assets. Then Goldman went overseas and found a pair of banks, one Dutch, one German, who bought the bulk of this multi-billion-dollar deal without telling the banks that, in fact, the assets in the deal had been selected specifically to lose by this guy, John Paulson, who was betting against them.
So they
Goldman
vet these products, and they choose them because they know they're going to self-destruct.
Right. Yeah. No, they were specifically chosen to fail. That was the idea. And Goldman called this service renting the platform. In other words, these foreign banks, they wouldn't have bought this deal if they knew that the guy on the other side was a hedge fund, carnivore who was betting against them. But Goldman essentially, quote unquote, rented their good name to John Paulson, so that these banks would buy from Goldman, who they assumed was neutral. And for this service, Goldman only charged $15 million, which is a very small amount of money to commit that kind of infraction. But Paulson ended up making over $1 billion in that deal.
Well, good for him. I'm sure
Yeah.
he must deserve it. I mean, you don't make that kind of money unless you're a really good person.
Exactly.
So when you hear this news that Eric Schneiderman is starting to investigate these guys, do you have a feeling that do you know anything as to whether or not this is the type of stuff he's pursuing at this point?
Well, it's in the general ballpark of that. I mean, I think this is that had more to do with CDO origination and some other things that were sort of mildly tangential. I think the things that I heard about this morning also involved defrauding the government. Some of these banks were, for instance, charging the government for FHA properties that actually had where they'd actually paid a lot less in the open market to get them. So it's a different thing, but the general idea of going after banks, and they're the big ones, Bank of America, Citibank, and that sort of thing. That's a good thing. I mean, it's definitely. But what I was writing about in this piece is, I think it was a highly symbolic moment, last year when Goldman Sachs, which is the top company on Wall Street, when they came to Washington to talk about all this stuff, and they basically just brazenly lied in their testimony and walked away from it. We're still waiting for the government's full response on that, and that's what we're talking about.
And this committee, do they formally refer it to the Department of Justice, or they just put it out there and just say, "We're done"?
No, they deliver it, but they don't have any relationship with the Department of Justice. They're in the same boat that we are. Levin, when the report was done, he wrote a letter to Eric Holder at the Justice Department and said, "Hey, we think you should look into this," but that doesn't mean that they're going to do anything. They don't have any special pull there, so we're all in the same boat.
All right. Well, Matt Taibbi, thank you so much. The piece is in this month's Rolling Stone, folks. I encourage you go read it. I think you can read it online or pick up the magazine. Why not pick up the magazine?